Welcome back to our video series featuring commentary from our expert panelists that participated in our webinar looking at communication challenges and learnings from COVID-19. COVID completely changed the way most people worked, with remote working forced upon many. This presented new challenges in how to communicate with staff and how to keep them engaged at a time when the economy was tanking and unemployment was on the rise. Head of People and Culture at oOh!media, Steve Reid, shared with us some of the challenges and learnings of internal communications that he and the leadership team navigated.
And I think for me, a crisis like this always brings out the best and worst in people. And I think you see that distinctly. And as you said earlier, Pete, there is no playbook for something like this, particularly from an internal perspective or even community perspective. So for me, it was about going back to when this started and it started to get real is, what's the most relevant thing I can think of? And having done quite a bit of M&A and merger work in the past, it's the thing I've seen that's created the most level of uncertainty for people on scale. You know what I mean? The big difference with this being is, with a merger, you control a lot of the uncertainty that's created. In this case, it's all outside. But I think it's looking at the same principles, is that when people feel uncertainty, what's important, and for us, the important thing was, how do we provide clarity? Right? So one of the best ways to do that is that consistent communication, constant communication, and make sure it's relevant for people as well. So one of the first things we did was get in a very regular comm cycle, whereby we had weekly updates from our CEO. We used video format for that. So either it was recorded video in some cases, or it was through a massive Zoom call where people could actually interact and ask questions, because, in these times, emails don't really cut it. You've got to have that personal connection with people as well. And that's the quickest way to get out and do that. We also knew that decision making would be critical when you don't have a playbook. You're doing a lot on the fly and you're making a lot up as you go, and you're having to make a lot of decisions quickly. As Michelle said, breaking news every 5 minutes means that internally there's a lot to process and manage and think through. And so we set up our business continuity planning team, which was effectively the executive leadership team plus a few people, including comms and health and safety. And, we had twice daily meetings to start with: morning check-in, afternoon check-in, what's happened, what's changed. We were across anything that came from the government or other sources in terms of things that was happening. And the process for that was taking that and saying, oh, what does that mean for us? How do we translate that into something for employees to make sure, one, they knew what was happening, two, they knew what our response to it was, and three, where they stood in the process. So for me, I think going into this also, it's important that we thought about, okay, well, if there is no playbook, what principles do we want to apply? And, I'm a big believer in these kind of situations is that how you treat your employees through this period becomes the new baseline for how they think we value them, if that makes sense. So the value they think they have to the organization will be as low as how they get treated through this process. So for us, it was really about, we had massive losses in revenue. And yes, we did have to do things like stand people down and go to reduced hours and ask people to take extra leave. So for us, it wasn't about that was something that we had or didn't have to do, and there's a lot of companies that have had to do it. It was more about the way we did it and the way we engaged people and made sure that they knew they were voluntary processes in a lot of cases, and that it was okay if, for whatever reason, for example, your partner had been stood down or lost their job or was on reduced hours, that you couldn't contribute in the same way as others. That was okay. And so actually prioritizing the well-being of people through this process, and still getting the right result for the organization in terms of people contributing and saying, I'm happy to contribute hours, that kind of thing. But actually looking at the well-being of people as the first and foremost responsibility we had. I think lessons as we go through this for us have been, what we see from the surveys we're doing regular surveys of people, is the two things that come through loud and clear is the safety piece. So for us moving forward, even as the cases start to drop off, it's the return to work piece is critical. And there's a lot going into, planning around how do we actually get people back to work to make sure they feel safe, they feel safe in the environment. How do we allow people who want to stagger that a bit later, do that? And I think we've definitely learned, that flexibility is not just an option. It's, it's real, and everyone can work flexibly. There are some roles that absolutely need, if you're in a factory or out on the road, where you need to be there. But for most roles, we can work flexibly. And I think a lot of people are saying, I want more of that, to continue. So it's how we bring people back and allow that flexibility and safety for them. And I think key for me in all this, as I said, is putting people front and center of that and saying, how do we want them to remember this experience and how we treated them through it. And I think coming out the back end of that, if you do a good job of it, it gives you the best chance of, coming out and surviving as an organization, because your people want you to survive.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. That was some really interesting aspect from an internal perspective. I am going to ask you all to make a final statement, a final comment in regards to what communicators should be thinking about and marketers should be thinking about into the next 6 months. We might start with Steve and then work our way around.
Thanks, Peter. I think it's around that safety, and it's actually how do you make it personal for people, because it's the only time they really change or think about what do I do differently is when it's personal. So.